Good evening, America. We are here to bring you an exciting debate concerning the recent release of Peter Arnett's interview with Saddam Hussein.
Bringing you a debate between Peter Arnett, the man who went behind the battlegrounds to interview Saddam Hussein, and Emily Orville, who turned down the opportunity to interview Hussein.
Please join us in getting more information on the motives of both Peter and Emily. What piqued your interest about covering the Gulf War? I was interested in the Gulf War because it was the only war that had media coverage on both sides of the battleground. We were able to access information on the U.S. side from, press conferences and live news reports directly from the Gulf. And we were able to get information from our associates in Baghdad, which gave people a fuller outlook on the war. So I think it was really important to really get both sides so our audience could really see what was going on.
I agree with Peter, but I wasn't interested in getting access to the enemy's point of view. I think it's really great that we were getting live coverage directly from the battleground, but I was worried that bringing our correspondents to the enemy's base to interview their leaders would put us in a dangerous situation. They are just as smart as us and very skilled, and I didn't want to leave any classified information up to be taken.
Peter, how lenient were the Iraqis with what they gave you access to? They were pretty suspicious of us. I would say that they weren't really comfortable around Americans, and they were really cautious. We knew that if we behaved, they would behave, so we weren't all that worried. They let us do our journalistic duties, but it wasn't easy to gain access to the troops on the ground or the military personnel, which is where the real information is. What are your opinions on the events that led to the attack on Kuwait?
I knew that right before Iraq invaded Kuwait, Saddam Hussein met with April Glaspie, the U.S. ambassador to Iraq. I believe that Hussein told Glaspie that he planned to invade Kuwait. I know that the U.S. did not support Hussein's decision to invade Kuwait, which is why we eventually went to war with Iraq. Hussein was mostly frustrated with the fact that Kuwait supposedly taking Iraqi owned oil. I don't think that it was a good idea for us to get involved in the war in the first place, much less send reporters to the battlegrounds.
Finally, if you were going to Baghdad, which you didn't, what would be your biggest fear about going?
When I was offered the opportunity to go to Baghdad and possibly interview Saddam Hussein, it took me a while to make my decision. It was a great opportunity to make a difference in the news world, but came with many possible consequences. I don't think that I was mentally ready to handle that sort of responsibility. I think that being in the presence of someone with such power and bad credibility would have too much impact on my mental state. And I don't think that anybody should go through that.
But Emily, you said it yourself. It's an amazing opportunity. It made a huge difference in the news world and was groundbreaking. Even with all of the risks, don't you think that the information that we got out of it was worth it? The information that we got was from the man himself.
It is just luck that the trip turned out well. The reports were live, and if something had gone wrong, it could very well have taken all of our lives. I respect your decision to take the chance. It was very brave of you. I just don't see the real benefactors of taking the trip if something had gone wrong.
Okay. Peter, tell us about your experiences that you had while in Baghdad. Don't hold back. To begin, I witnessed a lot of violence on my trip. I'm just going to lay that on the floor. There is a lot of violence going on, as you would expect. But I wasn't too terrified or scared until we really witnessed U.S. violence. The U.S. began bombing Baghdad. It's hard to watch your own country participate in such violent acts while we just sit idle by and watch, as we do back home. As all these people are being killed, we're just sitting and watching it happen on our television screen. So I think it was really important to really get on the battlegrounds and really experience what was going on. As you probably have seen in my other interview with my colleague, Bernard Shaw, he had a pretty graphic description of one of the more scary days that we had.
Sorry, I didn't catch that interview. What did Bernard Shaw say?
Oh, okay. So we were staying at a hotel and were present during the first hour of bombings, of American bombing. So when the U.S. bombed office buildings in Baghdad, they were just a few blocks away from our hotel. Bernard called it the center of hell, so it was quite stressful. So despite the late hours of the night, the sky was shining bright with the power of the bombs. It was very terrifying, and that is when I realized what possible danger I was in. You're back, Peter. Could you tell us about your interview with Saddam Hussein? As the last reporter to speak to him, tell us how it went. Well, it was a lot different from what I had expected. He was surprisingly kind for what I knew about him, considering the fact that he was leading a city at war. His pleasantness and flexibility about answering my questions was impeccable. He allowed me complete freedom when it came to asking him questions, but there were other people in the room and they were not pleased with what I was asking. He was fine with me asking whatever I wanted, but wasn't very elaborate with his answers. I mean, I'm sure that if he had answered all my questions in depth, it would have made Iraq feel very vulnerable, and so it's understood that he didn't answer my questions fully. How did what you knew about Saddam Hussein impact your meeting? It was difficult for me to go in with an open mind, knowing all that I did about Saddam Hussein. He enforced the decision for Iraqis to invade and pretty much destroy Kuwait's infrastructure, and it was hard for me to treat him nicely. Hussein went on to attack, knowing that people would die.
100,000 Iraqi soldiers died just in the invasion of Kuwait. Over 375,000 soldiers died over the entire 8 years. If Hussein had it in him to risk the lives of his own men, wouldn't you think it'd just be as easy for him to take the lives of Americans?
We were very careful not to offend him or any of his colleagues, but yes, we were scared at times. It's very scary, the things that he's done in the past. For our final question, now that you have more insight into Peter's experience, would you change your decision to not go if you could?
Absolutely not. I'm sure Peter was safe in this particular expedition, but I honestly don't think that the impact of the interview was worth the risk. Peter mentioned that he witnessed an American bombing a few blocks away from his hotel. There is a high chance that those bombs could have been closer and critically injured or killed Peter and his colleagues. That is obviously not ideal. It would put the U.S. under a ton of media attention and make people question why they were supporting the war. I'm glad that the interview turned out well and everyone came home safely, but I personally do not believe that there was much reason to take the risk.
Fair enough. For listening to Peter and Emily's expose on going to Baghdad and the pros and cons about it. See you next week, where we interview Amanda Bynes on her newest haircut.